This has been a very weird metagame since Scorpion Brand New Day came out. Let's take a look at 6 decks that are succeeding in High Infinite that I wouldn't have expected to be doing this well. We're going to start with Cerebro 4, which is an underrated list in the current context of the metagame. One of the major things that is happening right now is there are plenty of people who are running around playing things that are doing combinations of cards with Scorpion Brand New Day to try to afflict as many things as possible. This is generally a very dangerous strategy, unless of course you play Luke Cage and then only play cards in the front lanes. Another card that is particularly potent at protecting your cards is Invisible Woman, who can hide multiple cards behind her shield and then prevent them from getting afflicted during the course of the game because they'll reveal after it's done. In other words, this is the single deck in the entire game that has the best combination of naturally good matchups into the card that a lot of people are playing because it's new and fancy and cool, and a ton of points just baseline that it can have access to. This is a deck that has a lot of powerful output. As long as you get to that Cerebro one way or another, you are going to be playing a very strong fair game of Marvel Snap. If you get multiple Cerebros, you are going to be playing a very unfair game of Marvel Snap. And this is a deck that right now gets to do all of that while running very relevant tech. We've already discussed the matchup that we have against the various combinations of Scorpion decks, but we also have access to Mercury and Shadow King. These are incredibly crucial cards. Shadow King shuts down all sorts of random stuff, from Venus decks to people doing Black Panther things with Arnim Zola, while also managing to make sure that you don't screw yourself over too badly with Mother Ascani. Otherwise, you're really only hitting Luke Cage and Cerebro with it. So if you're able to hit something that isn't those things, well, Shadow King is your best bet for making that not obliterate your Cerebro. Mercury, of course, is excellent into a wide variety of decks. Both Batroc and the Multiple Man deck are very clearly top-tier archetypes at the current time. So this list has a ton of relevant tech and a ton of points. This list, which was built by Derek, is mostly being played in High Infinite by Quake Enjoyer. And like many Derek decks, it's an attempt to recapture past glories of doubling things onto Maverick. In other words, this is Carter Combo, but it's trying to do it a very different way. If anyone recalls the Carter version of the Sholau list that was doing something similar to this Moonstone package back when Sholau was still a very powerful way to play your Maverick, one of the strongest ways to play Sholau once that metagame started to develop, because it was going to be one of the strongest things at making your Maverick big. And this is tapping into a lot of the same things. Captain Carter and Moonstone mean that your Mavericks and Sticks are incredibly large. That is a very powerful thing to do at baseline. We are also, of course, brooding it up. We're doing our typical Agony, Surge, Jeff stuff. This is basically an attempt at acknowledging that the loss of Mother Ascani to the traditional Captain Carter deck made it a lot worse at being a Storm Horseman of Famine deck. So if we're not going to be a Storm Horseman of Famine deck, we have to do a bunch of different stuff to make up for it. And yes, some of that stuff is smaller buffs that we try to stack up to the point that they eventually make enough power. However, one of the best things we can do is just put a Moonstone down somewhere. Now, this is a deck that is running the risk of being a little bit predictable, right? Your Moonstone lane is kind of something that's going to be very easy for your opponents to blow out if they're playing things like Cosmic Ghost Rider. We are not a Cosmo list. We are not a Juggernaut list. We are even maybe helping ramp them just a little bit. That is not necessarily a good thing, but this is a deck that has a lot of surprise point output in ways people probably don't expect when it's able to pivot off of that Moonstone lane with cards like Maverick and Stick. In other words, this is a Captain Carter combo list that is trying to adapt to the new reality of the archetype. A list I've been quietly impressed with is literally discard. And quietly impressed maybe is the right way to talk about this because this is not a deck that's blowing the doors off of anybody. All of your wins are sort of hard fought and difficult, and you don't really have a ton of interaction. And so your opponents are often able to dictate terms to you, whether it's because they have the interaction that maybe Cosmic Ghost Riders or Dracula, or because they are comboing off in a way that goes over the top of you. All of that is true. But right now, the metagame does feel quite fair, with the exception of some draws from the Scorpion combo decks. A lot of the rest of things that people are doing are pretty in the range of, oh, that's like a normal deck that's doing normal deck things. And when you're playing against a bunch of people who are in sort of Aurora Doom 2099 range, and full disclosure, I just finished, like, as I'm recording this, I just finished playing Doom 2099 for like 3 hours and climbing like 70 SP on it. Like, it's a totally fine deck. And that, I think, is actually kind of the closest analogy to what discard is here. This is just a Doom 2099-ish deck. You have worse interaction, but more points. You have more things being dictated to you, but more points. And that's just really kind of fundamentally what's going on here, is that the metagame is relatively weak enough, relatively not combo-y enough, that you can just play this and not be embarrassed about it, which is good, I think, because discard's a particularly compelling archetype, but I don't expect this one of all the decks on here to stick around. I think this is a very temporary kind of thing that is maybe already changing depending on how developed the Scorpion decks get. If you do decide to play a deck like this, the big thing you need to worry about are people interacting with the stuff that you have and people going over the top of you with combo. That said, one of the things that's a little bit decent against the Scorpion combo decks is just having guys that are really, really big across your front row and not actually having too many guys on the board. The guys on the board that you have all being pretty large can help against some of their less combo-y oriented game plans. Like, for example, when they do something like play a Scorpion and then Tau Mandala the Scorpion, they still need to afflict your guys with more things than that. Like, that will be -8 on everything, but if your guys are bigger than 8, they kind of still have to figure out how they're going to win the game. And so you are able to, with cards like Dracula, Weapon H, Big Apocalypses, Big Khonshu's, Morbius, even, like, reasonably push through that stuff some amount of the time. It's not guaranteed, but just being able to go that tall is helpful in those matchups. I could probably talk about a bunch of Scorpion lists because they're all technically new, but I feel like it's a little bit cheating to talk about Scorpion when it's kind of the new hotness. I think that, like, the big difference between this week and last week is people are playing a lot of Scorpion, and that's not really a fair thing to say is a weird deck tearing up high infinite. So instead, I've got a weird Scorpion list from Cougar. Cougar's a big fan of doing bullseye things, and this is kind of a crazy pull. The idea here is bullseye Joecast the Prodigy as your engine, and then what you're going to do is activate that bullseye a billion times with a Scorpion on the board. The other thing, of course, you can do is do the exact same thing, but with Omega Sentinel. The baseline thing that you want to accomplish here is getting a swarm discarded in order to feed the beast on your bullseye. But either way, if you pull off either of these combos and people don't stop you, you're probably winning the game. This is not a maximal Scorpion combo deck. This one is more built to beat mid-rangey stuff that doesn't have the right interaction. And I think it kind of does just absolutely beat mid-rangey stuff if the mid-rangey stuff doesn't have the things it needs to have. Like, if you're on the bullseye plan, you can get got by a Mobius and Mobius. Basically, every Joecast the deck is vulnerable to things like CGR, Red Guardian, even Deafening Chord. But outside of that, you are really putting pain out there when you play a deck like this. You are spray and praying all over the board with Bullseye, or you're hard targeting the strongest cards on the board. Just baseline playing something like Joecasta, Omega Sentinel, Prodigy the Joecasta, play Scorpion is -70 points. That is quite a big outcome. I've been seeing a couple people mess around with something like this. I'll be fully disclosing this one. I got it from Untapped, and I saw Andre Var doing something fairly similar, I think, and then I lost to another guy a couple times because I was playing Doom 2099. It turns out turn one Loki's like really good into that, but I think that guy had like a Wilson Fisk in it and was not doing as many of the Gambit things here. But really what I'd like to highlight is Loki OV feels kind of back. Again, like we talk about how this is like a little bit of a weird metagame right now. And so you kind of have to pick your poison as to like what you're trying to deal with. And obviously there are going to be some decks that's just like, yeah, my Scorpion opponent comboed off. But what I've tried to do is just treat Scorpion as like Man Spider. And just as long as you're respecting it, you're probably not losing too many cubes to it. It's Man Spider, it's Galactus. And then if you are able to do the math about as well as they can, if they're not doing like a full combo, if they're just sort of in the range of it, you treat it like Living Tribunal, basically, right? Like Living Tribunal is a great example of a deck that they don't always get to 10 billion power across every lane. Sometimes they're at like 25, and then your job is to get to like 27 and 27, and you can very easily do that. And I think that that is a pretty interesting development in how I've been playing against the Scorpion list, although maybe in hindsight it seems a little bit obvious. If you only look at the high rolls, the list looks super broken, but if you're staying against the high rolls, frankly, that's on you. I don't think you should ever, ever, ever be in a situation where you're seeing negative power on your side of the board, because if you're in that situation, you were supposed to have left the game. You should have known that that was on the table, and you should have dipped out already. And I think that once people start internalizing that, I'm really interested to see how Scorpion develops, because right now there's this build of Loki OV that felt like was doing all sorts of stuff that was really strong in a world where people were playing other small ball mid-range decks. Loki just seems really good. There's not as many like hard synergy decks against which Loki just sort of clunks. Yes, obviously the Scorpion is there, but like it used to be all Captain Carter. Really awkward. And you'd think Loki is good into V-Hand. It's really not good into V-Hand. And so the previous metagame was pretty harsh on this guy. And there's just a lot more people playing like, I'm playing a fair card right now kind of decks. And that is the kind of thing that Loki OV can meaningfully take advantage of. I can't say I can vouch for the exact 12 here. Like I said, I was just looking through Untapped after I played these people to see what was succeeding in the space. But I do think that I'm a little more impressed with Loki OV right now than I was previously. And a lot of that is because there's a real chance this might be the Gambit deck now. I'm not saying that it is necessarily, but V-Hand definitely felt lackluster when I played it. And if this is the Gambit deck now, there's something to be said for that. I got an alternate build of Techno-Organic Virus from Zombies Go Nom Nom. One of the fascinating things about this metagame is about nobody is playing Mobius M. Mobius. Played for like 3-4 hours, saw one Mobius M. Mobius. And if nobody's doing that, there's just kind of not a lot of downside in trying to be a Scar deck, trying to be a Sasquatch deck, trying to be a Monstro deck, trying to be a Wilson Fisk deck. This is a fragile strategy, right? Like if people start doing that more, you're in a ton of trouble. But right now, a lot of people are experimenting and trying to figure out what to do to beat Scorpion and trying to figure out what to do to play Scorpion. And so you kind of just end up in a really good spot. But one card I specifically want to call out, and I think this is a really big deal, is Scarlet Witch. I cannot tell you how many limbos I am running into right now. There are so many Magic gamers. They are running around everywhere. If you want to play a deck like this and you don't want to get your chain absolutely snatched by all sorts of people doing all sorts of things with Magic, none of which are fun for you to sit through, you probably need some location changer. Like I said, I was playing Doom 2099 and I was this close to cutting Cosmic Ghost Rider for Legion. And I think this whole audience, everyone watching, kind of knows how I feel about Cosmic Ghost Rider in that deck. It says a lot that I'm contemplating cutting it just because of how prevalent all of these Magics are. Magic is a really powerful card, and having some meaningful ways to actually deal with it's quite important, because a lot of these combo decks will run you over if you don't offer some reasonable roadblock. And personally, I think that this is a much more reasonable roadblock, especially in a deck like this, than Luke Cage is. Their output over 6 turns is so much more manageable than their output over 7. And I think that that's kind of the big thing about all of the Scorpion combo decks right now. This is not a segment in this video. Doom 2099 is not a weird off-meta deck. I've just mentioned it enough that I felt like people might ask, hey, Cam, what was the Doom 2099 list you were playing? This is the Doom 2099 list I was playing. Enjoy it. I have had great success with it. I would do a video on it if it wasn't friggin' Doom 2099. This is like kind of my comfort deck, so it's hard for me to tell if I kind of just enjoy playing it and that's why I vibe with it, or if it's actually doing well right now. But I found it to be fairly successful currently, which is maybe a little bit shocking. I climbed about 70 SP on it, and I'm pretty happy with what I was able to do. And Doom 2099, just a really solid list, but definitely not one of the 6 weird decks that I was actually trying to highlight. I just wanted to preempt any questions. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful evening. And I said that like I had something else to say. I don't have anything else to say. I'm kind of just vamping right now, and I don't know how to end this video, so we're just gonna end it.